The European Union is both a political and economic alliance that comprises 27 countries. These countries hold similar regulations and values for economics, laws, social ideals, and policies. The European Union was forged together on November 1st, 1993, but has progressed into a strong alliance of trust and partnership since then. The current mission of the European Union has expanded and promotes ideas of peace, democracy, and environmental change throughout its territories. The countries share progressive ideals on not just how to change their nations for the better, but the world as a whole.
With all being said, now we will be transferring to France's opinion and their political ecology when it comes to climate control.
France is a globally recognized country for many good reasons. Due to its prospering economy, political influence, and creative field, France has become one of the most developed countries on a global scale and is an active player in the global market. From fashion to beauty to agriculture, France has a wide range to offer the world. It's the country's market that makes other countries respect and listen to when it comes to exchange of politics. France can be found as one of the founding members in organizations such as NATO, the UN, and most importantly, for this topic, the Paris Climate Agreement. France remains outspoken through the freedom of its democratic government on what progress we can make as a global society to change the world for the better when it comes to the challenge of confronting climate change. So, how will climate change impact France, and how has it already? There are definitely agricultural risks. The field of agriculture is one of France's most successful industries, and half of its land is used for that purpose. The estimated value of France's agriculture as of 2025 is around 90 billion. The country provides for itself, other neighboring European countries, or countries across the globe. The French export delicious wines, dairy, seafood, and cereals that the world has come to love. But the threat of climate change puts what we consume and France's industry of agriculture at high risk. It is projected that France would take an economic loss of losing 7% of their GDP. Droughts, heat waves, and water scarcity are all a factor of destabilizing the food security of France. We are already witnessing the environmental effects of climate change in France, since extensive areas of land are a part of the coastline. Rising sea levels are a concern to many in the population. Rising sea levels can lead to serious damage due to flooding, coastal erosion, damage to infrastructure or agricultural fields, or damage to ecosystems and human societies. France projects that by 2100, that we will see 65 centimeters of sea level rise under 3.0 Celsius. This jeopardizes the safety of the population in those locations and the land of agriculture. This pressing matter can also lead to water and food scarcity due to the damages of agricultural land. Other projected natural disasters that stem from climate change can jeopardize safety of populations or the environment are rise in temperature, heat waves, and droughts. Heat waves have increased in intensity over the years across the country. Summers have continued to become drier over the years, while winters become milder, which is a warning sign to the health of humans and the environment. Due to the increase in heat, agricultural production has taken a significant hit. There has been a reduction in crop yields, while there has been an increase in pests, disease, and low-quality produce. When the land is in pain, human beings will suffer too. So, what is France's response to climate change, and how do they plan to act moving forward? For starters, France is a crucial actor when it comes to the formation of the Climate Paris Agreement. At a United Nations conference hosted in Paris, France, 2015, 196 states came together to adopt the international treaty. The international treaty serves a purpose of pursuing efforts to reverse damaging effects of climate change and to be more environmentally friendly. The treaty went into full effect in 2016, holding each participating country accountable in doing their part in reducing emissions. France has made combating climate change one of its top diplomatic priorities by launching several of their own initiatives, while also being an active participating member in the Paris Climate Agreement. Mitigation can be defined as actions or changes in societal behavior taken to reduce or eliminate greenhouse gases emissions or to remove emissions. What mitigation plans France has for climate change can be found in the documentation of the UNFCCC. Their plans of mitigation involve implementing policies that put restrictions on deforestation. Ending deforestation would be beneficial because it protects the environment and its inhabitants while also reducing greenhouse gases due to the lack of machinery that would be needed for the process. France has made it a mission to protect biodiversity and implement sustainable management for these environments. Another activity that France does is categorizing where most of their greenhouse gas emissions come from. It is mainly industrialization and fuel as the source, so the French have formed 3 pillars when it comes to the challenge of solving the reduction of emissions that come from their own funding. So this moves more into adaptation plans, which are funded by the state. The National Low Carbon Strategy aims to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. The Multi-Annual Energy Program sets targets for reducing final energy consumption by 16.5% in 2028, compared with 2012, and the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan aims to move forward in a coordinated way in adapting to climate change. France has made significant progress against climate change within their own country. As they continue on their path for advocating for environmental protection policies, it is expected for them to see a positive change as long as they remain true to their laws. They have passed several laws in order to reduce emissions and to protect their land, such as the Energy and Climate Act, the National Low Carbon Strategy, Environmental Code, and more. The intended goal with these adaptation initiatives is to see restoration by 2050. French government policies are a helpful contribution to combating climate change in a diplomatic manner and in order to keep our planet healthy. It is a first step in the right direction, and other countries should view it as an honorable example to follow.
Now you know what is going on with France's political ecology. Now we will be going to Italy's.
First, I will go into Italy's involvement in the Paris Agreement. As a member of the EU, Italy has been a key player in the EU's climate strategies. Starting with its greenhouse gas emissions, Italy is a significant contributor in the EU, ranking third among other countries. Throughout history, especially around the World War II timeframe, Italy accelerated greatly in its industrialization by shifting away from agriculture to manufacturing. This led to producing significant greenhouse gas emissions. In recent years, Italy has made great reductions in its greenhouse gas emissions, reaching and often surpassing set standards by the EU. Italy hopes to reach around the target of 40% reductions by 2030. Also, Italy aims to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. They have made significant progress in renewable energy to help achieve this goal. They do this by diversifying their natural gas supply and developing alternative energy sources. Solar power made up around 8% of their total electricity production in 2014, making them the highest contributor of solar power in the world. Also in 2014, 40% of its energy came from renewable sources such as solar, wind, and bioenergy. So we talked about all the progress Italy has made in recent years. However, despite all this, they still face certain challenges. Italy still heavily depends on fossil fuels. Despite moving to renewable energy sources, Italy remains one of the largest consumers of fossil fuels in the EU. Italy's National Energy and Climate Plan predicted that by 2030, it will still remain one of the largest consumers of fossil fuels. Much of this gas is imported from other countries. Italian cities are also slow changing to electrification, and their city infrastructure is only slowly transitioning to alternative energy. Its car-centered cities are still significant producers of emissions, and electrification is limited. While progress has been made, Italy still has room for improvement. Next, I'll be talking about the impact of climate change. Due to its geographical location, Italy is facing major climate change problems. In coastal cities, such as Venice and Naples, sea level rise and coastal erosion pose a significant concern. Unprecedented weather, such as a drought in 2022, caused a major hit to its agricultural areas. In 2021, the temperature reached 119.8 degrees Fahrenheit in Sicily, the highest ever recorded in continental Europe. These factors caused great economic losses for Italy. Unpredictable and intense rainfalls, such as flooding and landslides, which take a significant toll on the agriculture infrastructure. One example is the Emilia-Romagna floods of 2023, which resulted in fatalities and widespread damage. So, as we can see, Italy is extremely vulnerable to these climate change factors, and its future remains uncertain. In summary, Italy has made significant contributions towards renewable energy sources and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Despite this, they still face challenges with fossil fuels consumption and remain one of the major consumers in the EU. Also, they face major risks in certain regions of the country from climate change.
From topics like World War II gas emissions to plans on deflating the use of fossil fuels on Italy's side, we now take a turn to talk about the Russian Confederation's conditions and what their plans are to help their ecosystem.
The Russian Federation, formerly known as the Soviet Union, is one of the world's biggest contributors to the current climate crisis, and a nation that is still undergoing and processing a transition into the new world order that is sustainable energy. The country remains the world's fourth largest emitter of greenhouse gases. According to the Climate Change Performance Index, it reported that Russia's latest energy strategy, adopted in April of 2025 and covering up to 2050, foresees an increased use in fossil fuels. Coal production and exports are projected to grow by around 50%. Oil production and exports are to remain stable, with gas production nearly doubling and exports tripling. The country is among the leading 10 countries with the largest developed oil, coal, and gas reserves, and it currently plans to increase its production. According to the UNFCCC, Russia spoke out against the phasing out of fossil fuels, while it recently updated its climate doctrine, which makes no mention of fossil fuels and their impact on climate change. While there is a broad scientific consensus that gas emissions from fossil fuels needs to be drastically reduced, Russia marginally upped its oil and coal production in 2022. A reliance on oil and gas production has dominated most of the Russian economy and most of Russia's political landscape as well over the past 25 years, and this dependence has infringed Russia's commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions not only domestically but internationally as well. Russia is currently being affected by the continued global warming, and an increase in climate extremes are most pronounced in the northern and Arctic regions of Russia. Climate change stands to harm Russia in many forms. The Yale Review states that the thawing permafrost in its north is disrupting infrastructure, and warmer weather and droughts are hindering agriculture, one of Russia's notable exports. Less access to clean water and natural disasters are also looming over Russia. This is not only affecting Russia's economy, but also creating a lower quality of life for its people. The Notre Dame News stated that environmental impacts already occurring in Russia include flooding, heat waves, droughts, and wildfires that affect not only communities, but agriculture, forestry, and water resources as well. Russia is one of the world's most important producers and exporters of grains, which means that the effects of climate change on Russian farms are a concern not only for Russians, but for everyone concerned with global markets for commodity crops and global food security. The Global Health magazine reported that in Siberia, Russia is experiencing the consequences of climate change in heat waves, melting permafrost, wildfires, biodiversity loss, and damage to infrastructure. Impacts associated with global warming are happening 4 times faster across much of Russia than in other parts of the world. The Yale Review reported that the Arctic holds an estimated 13% of the world's undiscovered oil reserves and 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas reserves. However, current conditions in the high Arctic make extraction extremely difficult. This has not stopped Russia, though, as Moscow plans to extract and export 100 million tons of Arctic oil by 2030. As temperatures rise, conditions ease, opening up more room for exploitation. This was even highlighted in Moscow's 2023 climate doctrine. Furthermore, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine has exacerbated the current climate crisis. The Russian-Ukrainian war is an extremely important example of current world events that is currently affecting and exacerbating the current climate crisis, as the number of deaths and structures that were destroyed have become collateral damage and as a result have released intense destruction into the atmosphere. The Notre Dame News has reported that the war has brought irreparable damages to the current global climate. From increased military emissions, which researchers explain that the emissions caused by the war will take the form of potentially several million extra tons of carbon dioxide. Military operations have all had a harmful effect on the environment by adding toxic chemicals and hazardous waste into the air and water supplies. Consequently, Russian domestic policy continues to treat climate change as an obstacle for Russian economic and environmental prosperity. Russia's response to climate change include agreements like the Paris Agreement. In 2015, Russia signed the Paris Agreement on climate change. In 2019, the nation formally joined everyone else. As a part of the Paris Agreement, it committed to become carbon neutral by 2060 and limit greenhouse gas emissions to 70% of the 1990 levels. However, the independent initiative Climate Action Tracker rates Russia's actions to date as critically insufficient, and therefore this target is considered unambitious and insufficient to address the wider climate challenge. In accordance with the Paris Agreement, the Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation implemented the following: the creation of a national system for labeling carbon-intensive products and disclosure of information about the source of electricity to consumers, creating incentives for equipping buildings with solar collectors, photo panels, and other solar-powered technology, expansion of producers' responsibility, which implements recycling fees, the requalification of waste into secondary resources, the prohibition of continuous logging, an emphasis on improving the energy efficiency of the economy and preserving forests, and price regulation of greenhouse gases. Unfortunately, Russia's goals toward carbon neutrality do not look ambitious. However, the emergence of a detailed scenario involving energy efficiency, carbon regulation, and forest protection measures is already good news for Russia, where the climate agenda has recently become an important part of economic policy. The progress that the Russian Federation has made in recent years to transition into a more energy-efficient country have already begun. In June of 2022, based on a climate risk assessment and the recommendation of the Ministry of Economic Development, the Russian government approved 10 plans to adapt to climate change in the following sectors, which include transport, fuel, energy, construction, housing, agriculture, fishing, environmental management, healthcare, the Arctic, civil defense, emergency situations, industry and trade, and sanitation and public health. This plan also includes regional plans that hope to address local extreme weather events, agricultural vulnerabilities, water scarcity, and other local impacts. Plans for other 77 regions are still in development. While these plans represent the acknowledgement of the vulnerability of Russia's population to climate change, they simultaneously seek to capitalize on the perceived advantages of climate change, including greater access to Arctic waterways, expansion of agriculturally viable land, possible increase in the productivity of boreal forests, and lower heating energy costs during winter. Russia also plans to adopt more ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets, improve climate policy implementation, and strengthen forest protection through better governance and increased investment in forest management. According to the Climate Change Performance Index, the Russian Federation is ranked at 64th place in the CCPI, keeping it among the very low-performing nations in the world. The index also found that fossil fuels still dominate Russia's energy mix, with renewables accounting for less than 5% of the total energy supply, and Russia still has no plans to substantially increase this figure. The effects of the fall of the Soviet Union are at the start of Russia's failure to meet and create solutions to modern-day environmental concerns, as economic ambitions have been Russia's priority since the dissolution of the USSR. As economic recovery seems to be of a bigger concern, the Russian Federation seems to have no plans to change its current economic and political agenda to create solutions to the current global climate crisis. In the end, the current climate crisis is one of the world's leading issues which we as a society hope to slow through global changes. Through the lens of political ecology, we are able to examine how the interconnectedness of politics and the environment are crucial to the outcomes of the policies set in place to protect our natural world as we know it. In the end, the current climate crisis is one of the world's leading issues which we as a collective society hope to stop through global movements of change. Through the lens of political ecology, we are able to examine how the interconnectedness of politics and the environment are crucial to understanding the outcomes of the policies set in place to protect our natural world. We can only hope that those in charge of creating solutions for our well-being are able to set aside differences and are able to collectively solve our current race against global warming.
With the Russian Confederation's refusal to reduce the use of fossil fuels, given its reliance on oil and natural gas as its primary means of trade beyond farming, now what is Germany's opinion on climate change and the risk of their citizens' health and economy?
Okay, for today I'm going to be talking about Germany. The first topic for today is Germany's mitigation plans under the UNFCCC. Germany's climate strategy is anchored to its commitments to the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, and it's one of the most ambitious in Europe. At the center is Climate Action Plan for 2050, which is setting a clear long-term goal for climate neutrality by 2045. To get there, Germany is transforming major sectors. Energy, which is accelerated phase out of coal by 2030 and massive expansion of wind and solar. Transportation, which is incentives for electric vehicles, expansions of rail networks, and higher emission standards. Industry, which is supporting for green, hydrogen, and cleaner manufacturing methods. Buildings, which is upgrading insulation, switching to heat pumps, and cutting reliance on oil and gas heating. These plans don't just reduce emissions, they're reshaping Germany's economy, infrastructure, and workforce. Moving on to progress towards the Paris Agreement. Many ask, so how is Germany doing today? Surprisingly well, at least in terms of overall emissions. In the last 2 years, Germany has had some of the largest emission drops in decades. By 2024, the country has achieved around a 48% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels. This is putting Germany on track for its 2030 target of a 65% reduction. A big part of this progress comes from the energy sector, where coal use is falling and renewable power keeps reaching new high limits. It's not all perfect, but emissions in transport and buildings are still above their planned limits, meaning Germany still will need stronger policies to keep momentum going. Still in the broader context of the Paris Agreement, Germany is among the countries making consistent and measurable progress. Moving on to adaptation activities and funding. Cutting emissions is only half the story. Germany is also pouring resources into adaptation, responding to real and accelerating climate impacts. The country's national adaptation strategy guides billions of euros in investments across federal and state governments. Key areas are including flood protection, especially after the devastating 2021 flood in the Ahri Valley, heat-resilient cities with cooling centers, tree planting programs, and redesigned public spaces. Agriculture support is a big one too, such as drought-resistant crops and modern irrigation. And lastly, improved early warning system for storms, heat waves, and even floods. Germany also contributes significant funding to international climate adaptation, helping vulnerable countries build a higher resilience. Next, I want to talk about some major climate hazards such as storms, droughts, and heat waves within Germany. Even with strong planning, Germany is still feeling the effects of climate change, and those three hazards stand out quite a lot. Storms The very powerful winter storms rolling in from the Atlantic cause heavy damage to forests, homes, and even infrastructure. These storms are becoming more and more intense and overall just very expensive to deal with throughout Germany. And droughts. Since 2018, many regions have experienced repeated summer droughts. Rivers like the Rhine, critical for shipping and industry, have dropped to very, very extreme low levels, and farmers are seeing reduced crop yields and more stressed soils throughout the years. Heat waves. Germany is warming faster and faster than the global average. Summers in 2019 and 2022 broke temperature records above 40 degrees Celsius. Heat waves now pose serious public health risks, especially for older populations. I now want to move forward to talking about environmental downsides that Germany is facing today. Beyond individual weather events, Germany faces a set of growing environmental challenges, such as forest decline, low river levels, urban heat islands, soil degradation, and more frequent flash floodings. Heavy rainfall events are increasing pressure on drainage systems and vulnerable river valleys. These issues show that even a wealthy and technological advanced country isn't insulated from climate stress. Lastly, I want to move forward to regional issues across Germany. Climate impacts vary significantly across the country. West and southeast face high flood risk, especially in the steeper river valleys. Eastern Germany has more of the drier regions, which face chronic water shortages. And then northern Germany, there tends to be more storm surges, and rising sea levels threaten the ports and low-lying communities. And then southern Germany experiences intense heat waves and heavy alpine rainfall. Each region requires tailored adaptation strategies. One size simply doesn't fit all. To close off this segment on Germany, I want to say that Germany is pushing forward with one of the most ambitious climate agendas in the world, and recent progress shows that change is possible even at a national scale. But at the same time, the country is facing real and growing environmental challenges, from droughts to heat waves, even to devastating floods.
With Germany's commitment to the UNFCCC's program to reduce fossil fuel use, it becomes clear that its economy relied heavily on gas emissions. With a turnaround, they have a positive emission drop to 44% compared to their previous decades. Will Belgium try the same to help its climate change warnings and make better policies for their country?
So I'm speaking about Belgium's role in climate resilience and mitigation. So as a very committed member of the EU climate progress, it doesn't have its standalone NDC plan for the Paris Agreement. However, it is a very strong contributor to the EU-wide pledge to cut the net emissions. And its contribution to this is by cutting emissions by, at the minimum, 55% by 2030, and it has made actually very significant leaps towards this, as it has already been a decade where it has not used any coal power. The last coal plant shut down in 2015, so it's actually coming up on 11 years now. And the power system now is almost completely reliant on green energy, which is really notably using offshore wind power, as it's one of the low countries with really significant. And it also has a very significant usage of nuclear power, as along with its obvious natural gas consumption for energy. And this is also really prevalent showing the shift away from sort of the old style of climate mitigation, where taxes are sort of just add-ons to existing taxation, whereas now climate mitigation in terms of managing the economy is the first practice. So this is, not a apologize for ecological destruction. It is instead a total prevention of this. And this is because the threats of climate change to at least the national borders are very severe and really can't be avoided or lived under. And this is because the main concern is sea level rise. A significant amount of the populated areas of Belgium live at or below sea level. And this is near the ocean in the Flanders region, where flooding has historically already been an issue even before the advent of climate change. So now there has been, really significant rise in flooding in Flanders, as well as sort of the national work that's been done within Belgium, which is actually relatively successful compared to, many nations with its contributions to the Paris Agreement. It also takes its sort of post-colonial stance as a former colonial power that continues to have this sort of geopolitical power, and uses climate diplomacy as a really significant tool towards that. Both within the EU, of course, as it's a very significant contributor to EU politics, but also in its post-colonial boundaries, especially within Africa. There's been a huge contribution to climate mitigation programs in the Congo, which is its former colonies, but also in Kenya, with the construction of the Green Wall in the Sahara, while also paying huge amounts of money in Burundi and Mali for the introduction of sort of these regenerative and climate resilient agriculture systems.
When discussing Belgium's issues on how they were going to fix climate change with their country and the political ecology, they discussed a lot about the 2050 climate neutrality and the shift systemic mitigation practices, the foreign climate neutrality efforts, and the aid that was being received from Europe and Africa. Now, will we be listening to the same thing that's occurring there in Switzerland, or will there be a swift change? Hi, today I'll be breaking down the political ecology of Switzerland, a nation recognized for its stability and strong environmental reputation, yet the country is increasingly challenged by climate change. When discussing Switzerland's global mitigation strategies, adaptation and funding approaches, principal environmental stressors, and their regional dynamics shaping its future. When it comes to the climate mitigation, Switzerland is active on the global stage and works closely with the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. Switzerland's main target is to reach net zero emissions by 2050, and in its official nationally determined contribution, it committed to cutting emissions by 75% by 2070 or 2030, apologies, with at least 66% of reductions occurring domestically. In 2024, Switzerland strengthened its climate laws by passing the Federal Act on a secure electricity supply with renewable energies, expanding solar, wind, and hydroelectric power. This is very crucial because over 75% of Switzerland's electricity already comes from renewables, but the country still relies on imported fossil fuels from heating and transportation. Despite these efforts, Switzerland is rated almost efficient by climate action trackers. This means Switzerland is doing better than many countries when aligning it to the 1.5 Celsius goal. The biggest challenge is reducing emissions for transportation and buildings, which are harder to decarbonize due to the alpine climate and reliance on oil based heating in older homes. On the adaptation side, Switzerland primarily funds climate protection using its own federal and cantonal government budgets. This domestic funding model covers most adaptation projects, while Switzerland also contributes to the Green Climate Fund to support adaptation in developing countries. Inside Switzerland, adaptation funding focuses on protecting infrastructures from flooding and landslides, water management, especially during hot and drier summers, agricultural adaptations like drought resistant farming, glacier and permafrost monitoring, early warning systems for storms and heat waves. The government created the Swiss Adaptation Strategy, financial planning tools that allocate specific funding from government budgets to prepare for expected climate impacts, support disaster preventions, and conduct risk mapping. Switzerland anticipates climate impacts to cost billions of Swiss francs per year by 2050. In summary, Switzerland adapts by anticipating risks, allocating local funding to initiatives, and employing data driven risk analysis. While Switzerland doesn't hold a literal national storm chaser summit, it has a functional equivalent through its National Platform for Natural Hazards, known as PLANET, and the Federal Office of Meteorology and Climatology. The institution works together with together to track storms, model extreme weathers, issue national alerts, coordinate emergency responses, and update hazard maps for communities. Switzerland is also organizes annual climate risk conferences and hazard prevention workshops that focus on professional summits. These events convene meteorologists, emergency responders, researchers, and policymakers to enhance emergency preparedness. Switzerland's political ecology faces key regional challenges: melting glaciers, reduced water flow to major European rivers. Um, a really important ecosystem is the alpine one that they have that requires international corporations. The cross-border air pollution complicates emissions control. A very key issue that is currently occurring by that is being tracked by Switzerland is the glacier amount reduction, like those of the Rhine, requiring Switzerland to work with European neighbors on water management. The France, Italy, Austria, and Germany are all dependent on the alpine climate systems because of the forest health, the avalanches, the biodiversity loss, and the ski tourism required for regional corporations for them to get their funding. A really important one is also air pollution, which travels across borders very swiftly. So, to maintain the cross border agreements are very crucial. Switzerland's climate policy is shaped by asylum seekers from regions hit by climate stress, and the hydropower is challenged by drought, making European energy cooperations increasingly important. Together, these regional complexities highlight that climate change is not solely a Swiss issue, and it is linked to Europe as a whole. Switzerland presents a unique case in political ecology. It is it's wealthy, organized, and globally engaged, yet highly vulnerable due to its alpine geography. Its mitigation and adaptation efforts are intense but still evolving. Storms, droughts, and heat waves are reshaping the country's environment, while regional interdependence forces Switzerland to collaborate with its neighbors. Overall, Switzerland's climate future depends on both domestic action and international corporations.